Aloha family, Spencer-Mack here. We're on a bit of a heavy topic today. I feel it is really my responsibility to share and talk about this. It has been all over my Facebook page for the last year and a half, but for some reason I haven't wanted to bring it into YouTube world. It's such a complex and deep conversation. I want to make sure that I don't become misunderstood and that I express it clearly. So I'm actually going to have at least a couple of these so that any kind of feedback I get from you guys, I have an opportunity to clarify if there's any misunderstandings. But this war is the most troubling thing I've ever witnessed. And the fact that my government is the one that's funding and arming it makes me sick. I haven't been able to stop posting about it for the last year and a half. In all honesty, if I wasn't already connected to God and knew that this is all God, it's all good, I would really be troubled. However, I am still very much motivated to share perspective that could bring some kind of harmonization out of this, some kind of clarity and harmony. Here's the problem. When you choose a piece of land that you want to create this beautiful society on, and it's already occupied, if you want to create a morally just society that's democratic, but you fund it and found it against the will of the people who live there, you're guaranteed to start a war, to have neighbors that are against you. Most people don't understand the very founding of Israel was done with violence against the will of the population and not in accordance with the laws of Judaism. Zionism actually originated from Christians. Later, Jewish Zionists, atheists, expanded upon the idea. They were open to it being multiple places. They were, looking at different states, different countries to found a nation. They ended up settling on Palestine. There's a famous saying, "The bride is beautiful, but she's already married." And this was an early Jewish observer going to Palestine to look at the land that they were thinking of settling and seeing she's already occupied. There's lots of people here. So despite them knowing the land was occupied, they still spread the motto, "A land without a people for a people without a land," so that they could get all sorts of people to move there, thinking that there's nobody there. Initially, Zionism was not well accepted, especially by the more Orthodox Jews, because it goes directly against the principles of Judaism. Now, if a Jew is somebody who adheres to the 613 commandments of the Torah, which is the original definition of a Jew, Zionists are not Jewish. Now, if you can keep changing the name of what it means to be a Jew to make it, okay, it's not the mother's lineage, at least one of your parents. Okay, it's not your parents, at least one of your grandparents. If you can keep changing the definition of something, is it the same thing? And if you're saying these are the same people, but they no longer adhere to the same culture, the only thing they adhere to is that I am Jewish, is that really a strong enough... There's nothing that would make it a strong enough case for that people to return to a land they were kicked out of 2,000 years before and then evict forcefully the people who live there now. The wild part is the people who live there now were, in part at least, descendants of Jews who didn't leave originally, some of whom converted to Islam and Christianity and had lived there for generations, for millennia. So if you're going to found a country and then you recognize it requires the removal or ethnic cleansing of a vast amount of people, 750,000 people got kicked out of their land whenever Israel was founded. The UN tried to make up for Britain's mess, because, some Zionists love to blame it all on Britain. I totally agree. Britain promised two different peoples the same land. He promised the Arabs sovereignty if they helped fight the Ottoman Empire. They did. They were lied to. They didn't get their sovereignty, at least this area with these people. He promised the Jews a homeland because they needed more money to continue their battles, and the Jewish people had the money to lend the British Empire. They started with homeland, and it was a very small percentage of the land. The Arabs totally were not up for this. They're like, dude, this is our land. You can't give our land away. The Zionists persisted. They came back with the first partition plan, which I forget what percentage was shared. The Arabs were like, no, we're not giving our land away. That's not a deal. The Zionists persisted. They came back later with another partition plan through the UN, which you must imagine the Zionists are lobbying the UN. The UN is largely a Western organization of Western states where the Arabs are not evenly represented. So then the UN comes up with a plan to try to clean up Britain's mess and say, okay, let's split the land. Israel gets 55% and the Arabs get 45%. And the Arabs outnumbered the Jews 2-1. Why would the Zionists get a majority of the land that is already occupied? Like, what did they think was going to happen when you give away land? And it's not like this land is barren. Look at photos of 1930, 1940, and how well developed. I mean, it was a modern city. They had ports, they had trains, they had operas, they had orchestras, they had plays, they had theaters. It was a full-on occupied, thriving economic city. I'm speaking of Haifa right now in particular, the most economically abundant port. And imagine another people come in. You've been born and raised in this place where you've helped, your families have helped for generations build an entire city that is now economically thriving. There's a whole diversity of people there, all living harmoniously. And then somebody comes in and says, hey, we're going to take all of this. Like, this is going to be my land. And that includes all the infrastructure. And then you expect them to agree with it. And then the Zionists will come like, we offered you a peaceful resolution. You give us half of your land and you can have the other half. And they called that a peace deal. So the UN did not have the power to say whose land was what. All they could do was make a suggestion. So the partition plan was not a contractual agreement. It was a recommendation. The Arabs denied it. The Zionists chose, fuck it, I'm claiming the land. So they claimed the state that was already populated and developed, and they were the minority of. They claimed it against the will of the population. This was not done democratically by any sense. What do you think that is going to do? If I walked into your house and said, hey, this house is mine now, that is an act of violence. That is an act of war. I am claiming something that belongs to you. You're of course going to fight back. You cannot say that the Palestinians started the war. Okay, if somebody walks into your house and says it's theirs and they're not going to leave, oh, and by the way, they stacked up massive military might in the process because they knew this was going to be a war, they obviously started the war. The Zionists started the conflict. Everything we've seen from here on is the Palestinians trying to get their fucking home back, trying to get their dignity, their self-determination back. And people are condemning them for self-defense, right? Because that's how twisted it is, because the Western media controls the narrative for so long. But now we're in a place where everyone can see it. All of the history is there. All the documents are there. Anybody who looks closely enough recognizes the foundation of Israel was immoral and violent. Key side note here, the IDF battalions, or before they were the IDF, the Zionist militias stacked up massive amounts of artillery in synagogues, schools, and gymnasiums. And they are actually prideful about this. They have plaques outside of them. There's like 55 different spots that they had loaded with military weaponry waiting for this because they knew it was going to be a war. And today they condemn Hamas for having weapons in schools and mosques, right? For things that they did. Guess what? Those militias ultimately became the IDF, right? Those militias were actually marked as terrorist groups by the British. They were bombing hospitals, they were throwing grenades in the marketplaces, all before 1948. They were terrorizing the local Palestinian population. They were designated terrorist groups. And guess what? They became the IDF. That's who the IDF is. That's how Israel was founded. Now, none of this means that I don't think the Jews deserve a state or shouldn't be there. I think the righteous move would have been, and there were Zionists who were saying this from the beginning, let us try to become the Arabs' best friends. Let us benefit them so much with our economics and trade and friendship that they love us and they want us to be there and we thrive together. That is the righteous path. That is the right answer to coming back to your homeland and creating healthy relationships with the people around you. If you instead claim that you are of superior importance, none of this was possible without supremacy and racism. There's no way you can displace a people if you see them as people. If you see them as equals to you, you could never kick 700,000 people out of their homes for your people to get homes. Supremacy and racism enables this. If we all viewed humans equally, if we were all the chosen people, you would never do that to another Jew. You can only do it because you condemn them or you hate them or you view them as less than. So that's the founding of what this whole thing is standing on. I am in no way saying that Jews don't deserve to live there. I love Jews, especially the practicing ones, the ones who are really adamant about their practice. I believe the system they have set up is beautiful. I do believe there are flaws in the way that it creates segregation, but it's still profound what has come out of it and how it has affected the world as a whole. However, they never just lived there in a vacuum. There were always multiple types of ethnicities living there. Now, all the Jews that were being abused in Europe fled to Muslim countries where they found safe haven. It wasn't until after Israel abused the Arabs in Palestine that all the other countries started to boot the other Jews out, which worked in Israel's favor. This was Zionism's plan to a degree, because they need as many Jews to move there as possible. There are stories, I won't even move into that, but the thoughts that they're willing to do terrorism on their own people in order to motivate them to move to Israel. They want them in Israel if they want it to succeed. So Muslim countries were a safe place, certainly in comparison to Europe. And because of the abuses of Arabs by the Zionists, neighboring Arab countries looked at the Jews and thought, this is a Jewish thing. But Judaism and Zionism are antithesis of each other. Zionism did not follow any of the ethos of Judaism. There are hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of Jews, of observant Jews that totally disagree with what Zionism is and what it has done. It has stolen and adulterated and abused the name and the history of the Jews. There's a whole population with that view that refuses to live in Israel because of what it represents and how it's been funded. So this is the conundrum we're in. Like, you have a people who has been clearly abused for 77 years. Like, look at the death tolls on either side. Look at the damages. Exponentially, the Palestinians have been suffering and destroyed. If you look at what life was like in Gaza before October 7th, it was completely occupied, in the sense, not that you had a military living inside, but all of the borders were controlled. They weren't allowed to have a port. They couldn't have an airport. They controlled what stuff you were allowed to export and make money on. They controlled what you could import. The IDF wouldn't allow them to import chocolate and fucking cilantro. Like, what kind of a jackass? What are you trying to... You're just trying to fuck with people at that point, right? That's not a danger to you in any way. So they've severely restricted the economy. There was no hope. There was no future for how to become abundant in this kind of an ecosystem. You're living next to abusive neighbors. You try to protest out loud. Guess what happens when you protest? Check out the 2018, the Great March of Return. And what happens when the Palestinians protest peacefully? They get shot in the fucking kneecaps. In fact, they get shot in the head. There were 7,900 Palestinians that were shot. I forget the amount of deaths. Oh, I think that was the deaths. Don't quote me on that. There was 34,000 injuries. Guess how many Israelis died that day? 0. So they were all within the fence of Gaza. They were marching, doing a protest, trying to get the world's attention. Like, guys, please help us out. Look what the fuck's happening to us. This is unjust. And the West, who controls the narrative, never lets anybody know that. So they're crying for help. They get shot when they're trying to get help. And then people are surprised that a military movement emerges that tries to fight back. Like, that's what blows my mind. They just write it off. They're saying, look how animalistic they are. Look what they were willing to do. By the way, they lie about so many of the stories, like 40 beheaded babies, babies burned in ovens, babies hung from a clothes hanger, none of which are true. 0 are true. 1 infant was killed, and it seems like she was in Kibbutz Berim, which many dozens of people were killed by IDF fire. The IDF openly shot houses with artillery tanks. They bombed cars that were heading to the border full of hostages. They were told to take out any car that might pass the border and go into Gaza. They have a directive called the Hannibal Directive, which tells them they need to kill soldiers and or civilians that can be taken hostages, because it's better to just kill the hostage than to have to negotiate. That's their directive that they activated on that day. There were houses full of hostages. They decided to just shoot the whole fucking house. One of them, I know they killed clearly 14 different occupants. So Hamas didn't kill those occupants. Friendly fire killed those occupants. So there's all of these lies that came out to, basically fuel and allow support for this insane bombing that came after that, where they've dropped 170,000 bombs, 80 tons of bombs. That's almost 3 tons of bombs per single militant in Hamas. Like, if you're fighting a 30,000 man army and you can't destroy them with 170,000 bombs, you're obviously not just trying to destroy the military. You're clearly trying to destroy the entire ecosystem so that nobody can live there. Now, there are clearly genocidal statements from all sorts of parts of the Israeli government. They're open in their statements. There's hundreds of war crimes documented by Israeli soldiers, yet somehow this is allowed to keep going. Like, it's absolutely insane that the U.S. is still supporting this. The majority of the world is against it, and the U.S. is the only one who could stop it and is still letting it go. Even the U.K. and France and Spain are like, whoa, bro, fucking chill, dude. You're going full psychopath here. You've become the Nazi. Like, people who are traumatized as a child, say you were abused, 2 things happens with people like that. They either become healers and they stop the pattern of abuse, or they become an abuser and they imitate what they were subject to as a child. Some Jews from the Holocaust became deeply compassionate, dove back into their religion, and became a godly person. Other Jews became willing to inflict suffering on others for their own safety. I can't condemn either side for that. I see every side as myself. I understand that when I'm asleep, when I am not aware that this world is me and I am harmed, I might want to hurt somebody else. If I don't know they're me, fuck yeah. That's the animalistic nature. When we're asleep in the dream and we don't know who we are, I'm gonna fucking kill that guy. I'm gonna hate that race, whatever it is. I totally understand it. I have complete compassion for it. I don't hate anybody here. I just recognize we are killing ourselves over ignorance, over a lack of clarity on identity and truth of who we are. That's the base of all of our suffering on this entire planet is the fact that we don't actually remember who we are. And we just happen to be everyone. And so anyone we hurt, we steal from, we do wrong to, we are just hurting ourselves. And until we realize that, we're going to be living in this insane suffering with psychopaths like this who are willing to destroy everything to support the protection of their ego. So that's my rant. I'd love to see what kind of feedback we get on this. I love you guys. I just had to share this. As you can see, I've been really diving into it. I'm sure this will open up a lot of conversations, or maybe you won't even want to hear it and I'll lose some followers. God willing, whatever it needs to be, it will be. I just had to express myself. This really bothers me. I honestly pray. I was hearing actually a Zionist say this the other day. There's no way we're going to give up this land. All of this land is ours. Even the West Bank, Gaza, it's all the Jewish people's land. Equally, I recognize that the Palestinians view it all as their land. And I respect that they're not going to stop. I want it to be both of our land, for both of us to be free. I thought that was amazing. I was like, this is the most open Zionist I've seen. That's a beautiful view. That's how they should have founded it in the first place. However, he then goes on to say, as long as the Jews have political and military oversight and control, so that's, you still got the fear in there. You still want the dominance, You want a collective democracy. You want to create an ecosystem of love and equality where everybody has a part to play. If you create a power differential like that, you're going to create segregation. That's the source of your problem. Stop segregating. Start seeing all of humanity as your family. We got to step up into that. That's the source of our problems. I pray we come to see that. And that's why I'm going to make content over and over again, reminding us that that is the truth of who we are, and try to find a way to drive it into the collective subconscious and conscious. I love you guys so much. Looking forward to hearing your feedback. It's wild times. The fact that something like this could go on this long blows my mind and hurts my heart, and it would drive me crazy if I didn't have the boon of coming to know God in my life. I am so grateful that I know this is just a temporary dream and that I am responsible for all of it. And so I am consciously trying to influence, redirect this dream we're creating into something more coherent and directed towards God for the good of all. Bring harm to none. Thank you guys. Love you so much. As always, subscribe and like. Let me know what you want to hear about. What do you want to talk about? If anybody has a passionate point of view and you want to come on and talk with me, let's do it. Lots of love, guys. Looking forward to the future. We're going to figure it out. We're going to wake up. Love you so much. Peace.